We are 2 weeks into the NFL season, and some teams are off to scorching hot starts while others are off to very poor starts, to say the least. A Super Bowl champion is not crowned after 2 weeks, but with there only being 17 games, every game in the NFL means that much more. And some teams have lost games through the first 2 weeks that they, quite frankly, shouldn't have. And losing a game in the NFL is always a big deal, let alone 2 games to start the year. And it's time we have a conversation about 4 teams in particular. All 4 teams in today's video are 0-2, and while not all 4 had Super Bowl expectations for the 2023 season, they all envisioned a better start to the year than what it's been through the first 2 weeks. And remember, at the release of this video, just 10 days ago, they were 0-0 and expected to be competing. And boy, things can change quickly in the NFL, and with that preface out of the way, let's dive right in. And we are starting today's video with the Minnesota Vikings. They are 0-2 after losses to the Bucs and Eagles in a span of 5 days, and out of any of the teams in today's video, I worry the least about them, and here's why. This team has 7 turnovers in 2 games and has a turnover margin of -6 through 2 games and have 2 losses by a combined 9 points. And to be that horrific in that specific category, while still not only being competitive, but taking each game down to the wire, leads me to believe they will be fine in the long run. And for Minnesota, their next 2 games are home against the Chargers and at Carolina against the Panthers, and it's not unreasonable to think this team could be 2-2 through 4 games, which brings them back to 500. Granted, they play the Chiefs in Week 5, but Kansas City has not looked good through 2 games offensively, and while I do think Kansas City will ultimately win this game, I'd be very surprised if it's not one of the best games of the week in Week 5, and if it doesn't go down to the wire. But after that, there's a span of very winnable games, and sure, they're not going to be easy wins, but it's truly not unreasonable to think this team can be 7-5 or even 8-4 at their Week 13 bye. Will they, of course, is another thing, and the answer is probably not, but outside of the Chiefs game and the 49ers game, how many of these are truly unwinnable for the Vikings, where you just circle them in as an automatic loss before the game even starts? I don't think there's any, and especially with how quarterback Kirk Cousins has been slinging the rock through 2 games. Kirk has back-to-back 340-plus yard passing games and back-to-back 3-plus passing touchdown games, and it is extremely frustrating the team is 0-2 through 2 games. And star receiver Justin Jefferson has back-to-back 150-plus yard games to start the year, and first-rounder Jordan Addison has been a great addition to the team too. But the only concern I have with this team in the long run is how bad the run defense looked in Philly in Week 2. That was a manhandling performance by one of the best offensive lines in football, and I do worry about this team, who seemingly couldn't get off the field against Philly and who can't run the ball offensively, that they will be in for some long games down the stretch, specifically against teams like the Atlanta Falcons, who, as we know, love to run the football. But the fumbling for this team, offensively speaking, will go down. They're not going to lose an average of 3 fumbles per game every game, period. That would be a record beyond record in this era of football. I do have a few concerns with the run defense and even with the decline of safety Harrison Smith, and I do think 2022 first-round pick Lewis Cine is on pace to being a draft bust because he hasn't seen the field at all defensively this year. But the 2023 Vikings will be a very entertaining team to watch. There's no doubt about that. But if the defense can be even league average and the offense can, again, limit the turnovers and not have a -6 turnover margin through another 2-game span, winning the division title is not as out of reach as it may seem. Everyone in the North lost in Week 2, and they're only a game behind the Packers and Lions. Clean up the turnovers and try to be average defensively, and things will work itself out. Next up is the Los Angeles Chargers, and they're in today's video for a few reasons. As we mentioned in the weekly recap video, through 2 games, the Chargers have allowed 877 yards of opposing offense. And now to dive into the Chargers situation a little further, this is particularly worrisome because Kellen Moore, the new offensive coordinator, is doing a good job of putting the team in a position to win games. And the Chargers currently rank in the top 10 of a lot of offensive categories, whether it's points, points, yards, the fact they've committed 0 turnovers in 2 games, or the fact they're holding the ball for an average of nearly 7 plays per offensive drive, which, by the way, ranks 4th in the NFL, the Chargers have 2 losses by a combined 5 points. And we dove into the Dolphins' loss last week, but what really worries me for this team in the long run is they couldn't afford to start 0-2. Yes, they were gifted a win by the Lions over Kansas City in Week 1, as anything to stop the Chiefs from winning an 8th straight division title would help. But the Chargers couldn't capitalize in not 1 but 2 straight games. And the 2 biggest problems for me with the Chargers in 2023 is there is entirely too much talent on this roster to be 0-2 through 2 games, and a huge problem for the Chargers specifically is they have a Week 5 bye. And as we mentioned during the Vikings segment, these teams play each other in Week 3, and given the Vikings have a few more days to rest and the Chargers are coming off of a tough overtime loss on the road, I do think the Vikings will win a close one in Week 3. I think it'll be a hell of a game, but I do think the Chargers will drop to 0-3. And they have the Raiders at home in Week 4, which of course is winnable, and I think this team will head into their Week 5 bye with a 1-3 record. But here's why 0-2 means so much more to the Chargers specifically. Their first 2 games off the Week 5 bye are home against Dallas on Monday night and at Kansas City. So there's a very real possibility this team is 1-5 through 6 games without a break in sight because of having such an early bye week. And I'm not saying if they were 2-0 that they could take a game off down the stretch or anything like this, but let's call it what it is, guys. The Chargers aren't going to win their next 14 games and be the number 1 seed heading into Week 18 when they play Kansas City for the second time. And what I worry about is the long-term health of the Chargers and how playing 13 straight games heading into the postseason will take a major toll on these guys' bodies. I know postseason isn't even close to the Chargers' minds at this point in time, but that was the goal, at minimum, by the way, heading into the season. And I really think this is the start of a wasted season because of the choice to keep Brandon Staley around for another year. I know Chargers fans absolutely cannot stand Dean Spanos and completely understand the frustration, but this isn't a 6-win roster that, if they catch some breaks, maybe they can get to the postseason. This roster is talented as hell, and not surprisingly, a Brandon Staley-led team is underwhelming, and they essentially picked up where they left the 2022 season, and that's with tough losses. And I don't see a good ending for how this plays out. Staying in the AFC West for the next team, and it's the Denver Broncos. Denver's 2022 season was obviously a disaster, and the season couldn't end soon enough. But 2023 isn't off to a hot start, and it's not like they have an easy schedule ahead of them either. They go to Miami in Week 3 and Chicago in Week 4 before playing the Jets at home in Week 5. I think the best case scenario is they're 2-3 through 5 games, but then play the Chiefs twice in a 3-game span. So not an ideal stretch for the Broncos before their Week 9 bye, and being 0-2 only magnifies this. But this team from a roster standpoint isn't great, and that's a problem in this conference. Forget the pass interference call at the end and ask if that would make a huge difference in this season's outlook. I don't think it would from where they hypothetically would or could be in January. Their top 3 receivers in no order are Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, and Marvin Mims Jr., and while I like Jeudy and Mims a lot, those guys aren't striking fear in opposing DBs, and especially not with a now 35-year-old Russell Wilson at quarterback. And I understand the frustration with how the Commanders' loss happened. Truly, I do. But putting up 33 points at home, by the way, should be enough to win any game in the NFL, and that's a problem in itself, is the defense isn't good either, and when you take a look back at the Broncos' first-round picks over the past 5 years, there's a reason why this team struggles, and it's because they're not hitting on their first-round picks. You know, players you want to build around and bank on being cornerstones for your franchise. 2018 was Bradley Chubb, who is now a Dolphin. 2019 was a trade back to acquire Noah Fant, and with the additional pick they acquired from the trade back was Drew Lock, who was a second-round pick. 2020 was Jerry Jeudy, 2021 was PS2, so great hit there, Broncos, and 2022 and 2023 were Russell Wilson. And obviously this is bad, but 2022 and 2023 were both top 10 picks, and when you're missing out on the opportunity to draft significant impact players like this, you better be close to perfect everywhere else, and obviously the draft process is a guessing game in itself, and the Broncos were, well, not perfect everywhere else, and now you see the effects of this. The biggest thing with the 2023 Broncos is they're not a piece away. They need a complete rebuild. If you follow the NBA, this team reminds me a lot of the Nets when they made the trade with the Celtics to acquire KG, Paul Pierce, and everyone else when they did. They're old, they're not as talented as they may be perceived to be, and they're going to lose a lot of games down the stretch of this season. The good news for the Broncos is they have their first round pick next year, but this team is significantly more than being Sean Payton away from competing for a Super Bowl. Next up is the Chicago Bears, and guys, it's time we have the conversation, or at least start to have the conversation. In 2 games now, Justin Fields is 40 of 66 for 427 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. And I'm going to be honest here, I don't think Justin Fields is the long-term solution for the Bears, but I also don't think it's entirely his fault. The situation from the minute he was drafted has been horrific, and what's particularly frustrating for the 2023 Bears 2 games in is it's like Twitter got in the heads with the Bears coaching staff and the running back narrative and everything around that, and they're trying to force Justin into being a pocket passer. And while yes, I would like to see Justin be more efficient as a passer, as everyone would, why try and take away what's an absolutely elite part of his game, and a part of his game that most other quarterbacks simply cannot do? I don't want to sit here and act like Justin Fields is a bust and that it's solely his fault, because it's not. Justin has been disappointing as an NFL quarterback, but I think the question you have to ask with Justin specifically is, how many quarterbacks would or could have succeeded in this situation? And I'm talking from the minute he was drafted back in 2021. His top 3 receivers are DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney, and Chase Claypool, and needless to say, that's not helping him maximize what he can be as a player. And this part specifically is on coaching. The Bears, for a brief period against the Bucs, didn't look bad, and it's because they were getting the ball out quick and they were in a rhythm offensively. And I think that's where my frustration with the Bears organization is. And it's because they'll do something good and have a good drive, and instead of trying to build on that, it's like they say, let's stray away from that completely and try and do something else entirely. Have Justin make easy reads, have quick design passing plays, and if there's nothing there, let him loose. He ran for a touchdown in this game and he beat everyone to the corner without really even trying. But nope, let's try and take the run game away from Justin. And that's where a lot of my frustration lies. He had 4 carries for 3 yards against Tampa. And there's also times where Justin self-inflicts bad plays, as there were several times in this game where he had time and was a statue in the pocket. And now that we're in his 3rd year, the internal clock has to be faster. But if nobody's open and you're standing in the pocket for 4 or 5 seconds, like he was multiple times in this game, do anything, literally anything aside from standing there and waiting for the pass rush to get home. You are one of the most dynamic players with the football in your hands. Go be Justin Fields. Yes, the pick 6 to Shaq Barrett with the game on the line was ugly, but I would counter with, why are we calling a screen on 1st and 11 in that specific situation inside our own 10-yard line? The final interception was a great play defensively, as Justin gave his guy a chance to make a play and the ball was there, but guess what? NFL players are paid to make plays, and while I don't think Justin is the long-term guy in Chicago, unfortunately he hasn't had a good chance from the start. But I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 23% of people watching are subscribed, and it makes a big difference. And until the next video, please be safe, and have a great day. Love you guys.